A French woman was scammed out of 830,000 euros after falling for an elaborate scheme involving an AI-generated version of Brad Pitt. It began in 2023 when someone posing as Pitt's mother contacted her online, followed by Brad himself claiming he was battling kidney cancer and desperately needed financial help or else he was gonna die. He sent AI-generated hospital photos showing himself bruised and hooked up to machines. Over time, the woman was manipulated into believing they were in a secret relationship, one he swore had to be kept quiet because of restrictive Hollywood contracts. She even believed they were engaged and that he planned to move to France to marry her. She wired him thousands for fake medical bills and customs fees for luxury gifts that he sent her but never arrived. After her husband divorced her over the delusion, she sent the scammers 775,000 euros she received from the settlement. Despite repeated warnings, she insisted it was true love until she eventually realized she had thrown her entire life away for a fake person. Adult star Emily Willis was left permanently disabled after a medical crisis at a rehab facility treating her for ketamine addiction. She reportedly suffered a heart attack and wasn't hospitalized in time, leading to 40 minutes of CPR, severe oxygen loss, and irreversible brain damage. After 2 months in a vegetative state, she now suffers from locked-in syndrome, a condition where the patient is conscious but can't move any muscles except the eyes. These photos from 1999 show Columbine student Dustin Gordon after being told the shooters were his good friends Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Dustin was reportedly a very nice kid and couldn't fathom his friends killing 12 innocent students. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after surgeons spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail in her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. This 15th century Italian painting is the earliest known depiction of the guinea worm, a parasite that enters through dirty water and grows into a 3-foot-long worm that painfully erupts from the skin. Splashing water on the wound eases the burning but triggers the worm to release more larvae, only repeating the cycle. In 1986, there were over 3.5 million cases, but the numbers have dropped off significantly ever since. In 2010, a Russian man died after being voluntarily buried alive by his friends. He was simply trying to overcome his irrational fear of dying when the ground suddenly caved in and crushed him. Grape had become such a big problem across Africa that a South African doctor invented GrapeX in 2005. It's a device with sharp teeth that gets inserted into a woman's private area. Any man who attempts to grape her will impale himself on the teeth and must go to a hospital to have the device removed. According to historians, we would have a lot more ancient Egyptian mummies intact today if so many of them weren't eaten during the Victorian era. People used to believe that the ground-up corpses of ancient Egyptians could cure different ailments. There's a room in the basement of Oregon State Hospital known today as the Room of Forgotten Souls. In 2004, hundreds of copper cans were discovered holding the remains of 3,600 mental patients who were cremated on site since 1917. Liam Ashley was a 17-year-old boy from New Zealand who had criminal charges pressed against him by his parents for using their car without their permission. His parents denied bail so that he would be sent to prison and hopefully learn his lesson. While being transported in a prison van, Liam was attacked by a dangerous criminal and killed. Best known as the original voice for nearly all the female characters in South Park, prolific voice actress Mary Kay Bergman stunned the animation world in 1999 when she took her own life at the young age of 38. Despite her cheerful public persona and thriving career, she was secretly battling severe mental illness, later identified as bipolar disorder and anxiety, which she kept hidden from friends, colleagues, and even her husband, fearing it would damage her career. Mary's sudden death sent shockwaves through the voice acting community, since no one had any idea she was suffering behind the scenes. A poor spider that was posthumously named Lawrence got stuck in this glass and couldn't climb up the smooth surface. So it apparently tried to web its way to the top until its silk ran out and it eventually perished. In 2020, Russian influencer Yekaterina Didenko's 29th birthday celebration at a Moscow pool complex turned tragic when approximately 55 pounds of dry ice were poured into the swimming pool. Intended to create a fog effect, the dry ice produced a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas upon making contact with the water, leading to suffocation and chemical burns among attendees. 3 people ended up dying as a result, including Didenko's husband, who succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. According to David Bowie's ex-wife Angela, she once walked in on David and Mick Jagger naked in bed together after a long night of partying. Angela took it as clear evidence of a sexual encounter, though neither Bowie nor Jagger ever confirmed it. Jagger dismissed the rumor as rubbish, while Bowie avoided commenting on it altogether. In the late 1800s, long before the invention of discrete vibrators, early models were massive mechanical contraptions powered by steam, hand cranks, or foot pedals. These devices were used by doctors to treat what was then diagnosed as female hysteria, a vague and outdated condition believed to cause anxiety, irritability, and sexual frustration. Rock Bitch, a provocative all-women British rock band infamous for their wildly sexualized live shows, had a notorious ritual during their concerts. They'd hurl a golden condom into the crowd, and whoever caught it, regardless of gender, was chosen to join them backstage for a night of uninhibited sexual escapades with the band. A 2003 study found that roughly 1 in 200 men globally share a nearly identical Y chromosome, all tracing back to one common male ancestor who lived about 800 years ago in the Mongol Empire region. The researchers linked this genetic legacy to Genghis Khan, giving the timing, geography, and his notorious reputation for spreading his seed like wildfire across his vast empire. In 2005, Thomas Montgomery, a 46-year-old married man from New York, created an online persona named Tommy, presenting himself as an 18-year-old Marine. Using this catfish, he began an online relationship with a 17-year-old girl from West Virginia named Jessie. But Montgomery's coworker, 22-year-old Brian Barrett, also became involved with Jessie online. When Jessie started shifting her attention to Barrett without him having to catfish her, Montgomery became consumed with jealousy. Eventually, Montgomery ambushed Barrett in their workplace parking lot and shot him 3 times with a military-style rifle, with one bullet piercing his neck as he sat in his car. Tommy was later arrested and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, receiving 20 years in prison. But the story didn't stop there. In a final shocking twist, it was revealed that the teen girl they'd both been obsessed with was actually a 45-year-old housewife who was using her daughter's photos to catfish men online. In 2002, New York City bartender Sean Doyle was out drinking with his friend Michael Wright when a drunken argument suddenly broke out after Wright accused Doyle of flirting with his girlfriend. In a fit of rage, Wright threw Doyle down an open manhole and he immediately started screaming in agony from below. The shaft led down to a steam tunnel where a ruptured vent had caused the water temperature to reach an estimated 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Doyle survived the fall and was pleading for help while trapped in the boiling water, but the heat and steam were far too intense for rescuers to reach him. Witnesses reported hearing his screams echoing through the streets like a whistling tea kettle, then abruptly stopping. His body was finally recovered 4 hours later, and the medical examiner later described the scene as one of the worst she'd ever seen. The metal of his belt buckle had partially fused with his pelvis, and steam had filled up his lungs until they completely ruptured. His skin had completely peeled away, and his organs were essentially steamed like a lobster. In 2012, a freak accident saved this woman's life in the craziest way possible. 42-year-old Donna Barber was at a family gathering in Arkansas when her teenage son accidentally shot her straight in the neck with a bow and arrow. The arrow pierced the side of her throat just inches from her carotid artery, close enough that she could feel her pulse pounding against the shaft. For a moment, Dawn remained standing in shock before collapsing in a pool of her own blood. As her family screamed in panic, some believing they just witnessed her death, she was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. But during emergency scans, doctors made a chilling discovery. Nestled deep in her neck, not far from the arrow's path, was a cancerous tumor growing in her thyroid. It hadn't caused any symptoms yet, and without the arrow, it likely would have gone unnoticed until it was far too late. Surgeons carefully removed the arrow then the tumor in a single surgery, and Dawn miraculously went on to make a full recovery. In the summer of 1974, 18-year-old Disneyland cast member Deborah Gale was assigned to the newly opened America Sings ride in Tomorrowland, a rotating theater that featured animatronic animals singing songs from different eras of American history. The attraction had only been open for 9 days when something went horribly wrong during her shift on July 8th. At some point during the rotation, Deborah became caught in a narrow gap between a moving theater wall and a stationary platform. As the mechanism turned, she was crushed in the machinery, likely killing her immediately. Guests seated nearby heard her screams followed by a loud thud, but tragically mistook both for sound effects from the show. In 2009, a member of Al-Qaeda attempted to assassinate Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Nayef by hiding a pound of explosives inside his anus, an unprecedented tactic at the time. Disguised as a remorseful militant surrendering during Ramadan, the terrorist was allowed close access to the prince and even passed through metal detectors without detection. Once face to face, he detonated the device, but his own body absorbed most of the blast, killing him instantly while only slightly injuring the startled prince. Adult star Faye Reagan appeared in over 400 films before vanishing into obscurity following her 2014 retirement. Her life quickly spiraled into constant legal troubles and homelessness. On May 7th of this year, she mysteriously disappeared from East Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas, a corridor infamous for crime and desperation. Last seen wearing green sweatpants and carrying a backpack, Reagan has not been seen or heard from since. Photographer Sam Davis captured the incredible moment a snake eel burst out from a heron's stomach while the bird was still flying, having chewed its way through the heron's throat using its pointed tail. Both animals were likely fatally injured. In the 90s, Disney planned to open a theme park called Disney's America near the Civil War battlefields in Virginia. A Disney executive said the park would let visitors feel what it was like to be a slave. Amid intense public outrage and political pressure, Disney ended up scrapping the disastrous project. During World War II, American Lieutenant John Fox died after deliberately calling an artillery strike on himself. Realizing that German troops were overriding his position, the strike delayed the enemy long enough for other American units to organize a counterattack that ultimately won them the battle. In 1944, American Private Edward Ahrens was found clutching a sword surrounded by 13 dead Japanese soldiers. Barely hanging on to life, his final words were, "I guess they didn't know I was a Marine." Hugh Redman was an American paratrooper who later spied on communists in China for the CIA. He was captured in 1951 and endured 19 years of brutal torture since he refused to reveal who he was working for. Most likely murdered by his captors, his ashes were sent home in 1970, and he was given a headstone that read, "His country above all else." During World War II, American Private Thomas Baker was gravely wounded by the Japanese but refused to give up the fight. He ordered his squad to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol and 8 bullets. He was later found dead with the empty pistol and the bodies of 8 Japanese soldiers scattered around him. Beloved by millions, Latina singer Selena was on the verge of global superstardom when cracks began to show behind the scenes of her fame. One of her most devoted fans, Yolanda Saldivar, had pushed her way into Selena's inner circle, first as president of her fan club, then as manager of her boutiques. But what began as genuine admiration eventually spiraled into obsession and control. Yolanda grew possessive, isolating Selena from others, and was soon suspected of embezzling money. In March of 1995, Selena met her at a Corpus Christi motel to retrieve crucial financial documents. Backed into a corner and fearing exposure, Yolanda pulled out a revolver and shot Selena in the back as she tried to leave. Selena managed to run nearly 400 feet to the lobby, leaving a trail of blood behind her before collapsing. With her final breath, she named her killer as Yolanda Saldivar, the woman who was once her biggest fan. During a pro wrestling tag team match in 2015, Rey Mysterio delivered a routine dropkick intended to set up his signature 619 move against Perro Aguayo Jr., but Aguayo slumped lifelessly onto the ropes. Unbeknownst to everyone at first, Aguayo had suffered a fatal cervical spine injury, likely caused by the whiplash to his neck from the dropkick. The match eerily continued on for several minutes before anyone realized that something was seriously wrong. Aguayo was soon rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. The cause of death was later determined to be cardiac arrest due to a cervical stroke caused by 3 fractured vertebrae. The coroner stated that the fractures took place at 2 different moments of impact and that Aguayo died almost immediately. Although Mysterio bore no blame, the incident left him devastated since Aguayo had been his longtime friend. It remains one of the only times a pro wrestler died during a match from in-ring trauma. When Steve Burns suddenly left Blue's Clues in 2002, dark rumors quickly began to circulate, including claims that he had vanished in a tragic accident or died from. In reality, he simply felt that it was time to move on as he began balding and could no longer see himself on a children's show. The day after filming his final episode, Steve shaved his head and stepped away from the cheery world of Blue's Clues, retreating into obscurity to pursue a somber indie music career. The death hoaxes that followed weighed heavily on him, intensifying his struggles with depression and casting a long, unexpected shadow on the legacy he left behind. In 2002, reclusive hoarder Bruce Andrew Roberts shot and killed an intruder who had broken into his home. Instead of reporting the incident, Roberts hid the body in a spare bedroom, covered it with a rug, and used over 70 bottles of air freshener to mask the smell. He lived alongside the mummified corpse for 15 years until it was finally discovered during a cleanup after his death. At age 43, French journalist Jean-Dominique Bauby suffered a bad stroke and became paralyzed. He ended up being diagnosed with the nightmarish condition of locked-in syndrome, where his mind was fully intact, but he couldn't move any part of his body except for one of his eyelids. Bauby eventually blinked out a 130-page novel that was a bestseller, passing away just 2 days after it was published.